"This is a suicide mission," the commander said. For Chris Kyle, it was a survival mission. If he retreated, 200 Marines would walk into a death trap. Kyle stayed alone and faced 11 enemies in 8 hours of hell. This is the story of how one man saved an entire battalion. The radio crackled with static and urgency at 0647 hours as Lieutenant Colonel David Morrison's voice cut through the pre-dawn darkness of Operation Steel Curtain in western Anbar province. Staff Sergeant Chris Kyle pressed his ear to the communication device, knowing that what he was about to hear would define the most critical decision of his military career. "Overwatch, this is Battalion Command. Intelligence indicates massive enemy buildup in your sector. Estimated 40-50 insurgents moving to establish ambush positions along Route Michigan. You are ordered to withdraw immediately to Rally Point Alpha. Acknowledge." Kyle studied the tactical map spread before him on the concrete floor of the abandoned water treatment facility where he'd established his Overwatch position. The building provided perfect elevation and fields of fire over the main supply route that 2 companies of Marines would be using in less than 4 hours for a critical resupply mission to forward operating Base Courage. His position was tactically perfect for protecting the Marine convoy, but it was also 2.3 kilometers from the nearest friendly forces and completely isolated if enemy forces decided to surround the building. Military doctrine was clear: isolated positions that couldn't be reinforced were to be abandoned when facing superior enemy forces. But Kyle's tactical analysis revealed a problem that his commanders couldn't see from their position 12 kilometers away. The water treatment facility wasn't just an excellent sniper position, it was the single most critical terrain feature for controlling access to Route Michigan. If insurgents occupied this building after Kyle's withdrawal, they would have perfect fields of fire for destroying the Marine convoy. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, Kyle's spotter, had been monitoring enemy radio communications through an Arabic translator at Battalion Command. "Chris, they're saying the insurgents know exactly when our resupply convoy is scheduled. This isn't a random enemy buildup, it's a carefully planned ambush using intelligence that could only come from inside sources." Kyle processed this information while calculating the tactical implications. The Marine convoy would consist of approximately 200 personnel in vehicles that would be completely vulnerable to coordinated fire from elevated positions. If insurgents controlled the water treatment facility, the convoy would be destroyed within minutes of entering the kill zone. "Battalion Command, this is Overwatch," Kyle transmitted, knowing he was about to make a decision that would either save lives or end his military career. "I assess withdrawal from this position would compromise mission success and endanger friendly forces. Request permission to maintain Overwatch during convoy operations." The response was immediate and unequivocal: "Negative, Overwatch. Intelligence indicates enemy forces of company strength moving to your area. Your position cannot be defended against those numbers. Withdraw immediately to Rally Point Alpha." "That is a direct order." Kyle looked at Webb, understanding that they were facing a choice between following orders and preventing what intelligence clearly indicated would be a massacre. The mathematics were simple but brutal. Withdrawal meant 200 Marines would likely die in an ambush that Kyle could prevent by maintaining his position. "Chief, what's your assessment of our defensive capabilities if we maintain position?" Kyle asked, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation from someone whose tactical judgment he trusted completely. Webb studied the building's layout, fields of fire, and approaches that enemy forces would be forced to use. "Chris, we've got excellent defensive positions, limited approach routes for attackers, and ammunition for extended engagement. If they come at us piecemeal instead of coordinated assault, we can hold this position indefinitely." Kyle made the decision that would define the next 8 hours and potentially the rest of his life. "Battalion Command, Overwatch is experiencing communication difficulties. Signal breaking up. Will attempt to re-establish contact when possible." Kyle switched off his radio before Battalion Command could respond, effectively cutting communication with his chain of command and making himself solely responsible for whatever happened during the next critical hours. Webb stared at Kyle with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Chris, you just committed insubordination. If we survive this, you could be court-martialed. If we don't survive, it won't matter." Kyle was already positioning his Macmillan TAC-338 for the engagement he knew was coming. "Chief, sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. Those Marines don't deserve to die in an ambush we could prevent." What Kyle didn't mention was the psychological weight he felt knowing that 200 American families might receive death notifications because he'd chosen to follow orders rather than tactical necessity. That burden was heavier than any enemy fire he might face during the coming engagement. Kyle's preparation for the most important defensive engagement of his career began with a detailed analysis of the tactical situation. Intelligence indicated that enemy forces were moving toward his position in small groups, probably planning to establish coordinated firing positions around the water treatment facility before the Marine convoy arrived. Kyle's advantages were significant. Elevated position with commanding views of all approach routes, excellent concealment within the building structure, sufficient ammunition for extended engagement, and most critically, the element of surprise since enemy forces weren't expecting American personnel to remain in position. Kyle's disadvantages were equally significant: no reinforcement possible, limited escape routes if the position became untenable, and numerical inferiority that would become critical if enemy forces coordinated their attacks effectively. But Kyle had learned during multiple combat deployments that tactical success often depended less on numerical superiority than on psychological factors, tactical innovation, and a willingness to accept risk that enemies weren't prepared to match. At 0723 hours, Kyle observed the first enemy elements moving toward his position. 3 insurgents armed with AK-47 rifles were advancing through the industrial complex surrounding the water treatment facility, moving tactically but apparently unaware that Kyle was observing their approach through his high-powered scope. Kyle's first engagement of what would become an 8-hour battle came at 0731 hours when the lead insurgent moved into an open area approximately 340 meters from Kyle's position. The shot was technically routine, well within Kyle's capabilities under normal conditions, but psychologically significant as the first step in a mission that violated direct orders. The .338 Lapua Magnum round found its target with precision that eliminated the insurgent instantly. Kyle immediately shifted position within the building, understanding that his muzzle flash had revealed his approximate location to any enemy forces in the area. The psychological impact on the remaining insurgents was immediate and unmistakable. They had assumed they would occupy the abandoned building with minimal resistance, a simple maneuver in what they thought was predictable territory. Instead, they were being engaged by precise, unseen fire from a concealed position. Kyle could hear fragments of their confused radio chatter through the static-laden frequencies, voices rising in frustration as they struggled to reconcile the unexpected suppression with their planned advance. Commands were shouted, repeated, and countermanded in rapid succession, revealing a unit suddenly paralyzed by uncertainty. Each faint movement, each misstep, drew disciplined fire, and the enemy's confidence began to erode even before he fired another shot. 18 minutes later, Kyle identified his next engagement. 2 insurgents attempted to approach the building from the east, utilizing a drainage canal to conceal their movement. From his elevated vantage point, Kyle could track their progress despite their attempts at tactical deception, noting the rhythm of their steps, the slight glint of metal equipment, and the sounds of cautious coordination. Their approach, slow and deliberate, made them visible to his trained senses even without perfect line of sight. Kyle engaged with the precision that had defined his earlier strikes. Within 30 seconds, both targets were neutralized. The speed and accuracy of his response exemplified elite sniper performance, minimal hesitation, efficient target acquisition, and flawless execution. Yet the effect went beyond the physical elimination of enemy combatants. The psychological ripple was immediate. Survivors froze, recalibrated, and second-guessed every movement. The fear of invisible, lethal precision compounded with the chaos of intercepted communications to create hesitation and disarray in what had been a confident advance. Kyle's ability to combine rapid engagement with sustained psychological pressure demonstrated the dual power of sniper operations, effect on both bodies and minds. By 0847 hours, Kyle had accounted for 6 insurgents while retaining control over the critical terrain feature that the enemy required to execute their planned ambush. The ridge and building were now under American control, denying the insurgents both elevation and cover. But the operational picture was shifting. Intelligence relayed by Webb indicated that additional enemy elements were mobilizing, approaching with heavier weapons, including RPGs and machine guns, and coordinating across multiple axes. "Chris, they're calling in reinforcements," Webb reported, voice tense but controlled. RPGs, machine guns, coordinated assault from multiple directions within the hour. "They're trying to overwhelm our position." Kyle assessed the evolving threat quickly. What had begun as a defensive engagement with isolated insurgents was escalating into a multifaceted assault requiring more than marksmanship. Enemy forces were learning, adapting to his methods, and preparing to counteract his advantages. The window for simple precision shooting was closing. Every skill Kyle had honed over years of combat, from fieldcraft and observation to rapid tactical adaptation, would be tested. He adjusted his mindset accordingly, calculating angles of approach, potential enemy fire zones, and fallback contingencies. The next hour would demand not just sharpshooting, but improvisation, anticipation, and the application of every principle of small unit defensive warfare he had ever practiced. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge his ability to blend lethal precision with adaptive battlefield thinking. The insurgents, emboldened by reinforcements yet unaware of the sniper watching them from above, were moving into a trap shaped by anticipation, skill, and the psychological leverage Kyle had already begun to impose. Each step they took was a move on a board that Kyle already understood, and he was ready to convert every misstep into tactical advantage. Kyle's defensive plan evolved to address the changing threat profile. Instead of maintaining static positions within the building, he would use movement and deception to create the impression that multiple American personnel were defending the facility. This psychological warfare might convince enemy forces that assault would be more costly than they were prepared to accept. Kyle's 7th through 9th kills came during a coordinated enemy assault at 0934 hours. Insurgents approached the building from 3 directions simultaneously, using covering fire and movement techniques that suggested professional military training rather than typical insurgent tactics. Kyle's response demonstrated why he was considered one of the most effective combat snipers in American military history. He eliminated 3 insurgents in rapid succession while moving between firing positions that created the impression of multiple defenders engaging from coordinated positions. The psychological impact on enemy forces was devastating. Their coordinated assault had been defeated by what appeared to be superior American forces defending prepared positions. Radio intercepts indicated confusion and declining morale among insurgent commanders who were beginning to question whether the facility could be successfully assaulted. But Kyle's most challenging engagement was yet to come. At 1147 hours, enemy forces began what appeared to be their final assault attempt, using covering fire from machine guns positioned at extended ranges while assault teams moved to breach the building through multiple entry points. Kyle's response required every tactical skill he'd developed during years of combat operations. He engaged targets simultaneously at multiple ranges and angles while using improvised explosive devices and environmental advantages to multiply his defensive capabilities beyond what enemy forces had anticipated. Kyle's 10th and 11th confirmed kills came during hand-to-hand combat inside the building when insurgents finally breached his outer defensive perimeter. But Kyle's SEAL training in close-quarters combat proved as effective as his precision shooting, eliminating the final threats at ranges measured in meters rather than hundreds of yards. At 1347 hours, exactly 8 hours after receiving orders to withdraw, Kyle re-established radio communication with Battalion Command. Battalion Command, this is Overwatch. Position secured, 11 enemy combatants eliminated, Route Michigan clear for convoy operations. The silence that followed Kyle's transmission lasted approximately 30 seconds before Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's voice returned with a mixture of relief and amazement. Overwatch, confirm your last transmission. You've been out of communication for 8 hours. Confirmed, Battalion Command. Maintain defensive position as tactically necessary to ensure convoy security. Route Michigan is clear of enemy ambush preparations. The Marine resupply convoy proceeded along Route Michigan without incident at 1430 hours, arriving at Forward Operating Base Courage with critical supplies and 0 casualties. Intelligence gathered after the engagement confirmed that insurgents had planned a coordinated ambush that would have destroyed most of the convoy and resulted in massive American casualties. Kyle's after-action debriefing revealed the tactical innovation and psychological warfare that had enabled him to defeat enemy forces despite overwhelming numerical disadvantage. His use of movement, deception, and precision fire had created defensive capabilities that exceeded anything enemy commanders had anticipated. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's official report described Kyle's performance as exceptional tactical decision-making under pressure that directly contributed to mission success and preservation of American lives. But privately, Morrison acknowledged that Kyle had been right to ignore withdrawal orders that would have resulted in catastrophic friendly casualties. The broader implications of Kyle's 8-hour defensive engagement extended beyond immediate tactical success. His demonstration that individual initiative could overcome institutional limitations influenced military doctrine regarding delegation of tactical authority to personnel with superior situational awareness. Kyle's willingness to accept personal risk, including potential court-martial to prevent American casualties, became a case study in military ethics courses examining the relationship between following orders and protecting lives. His decision represented the kind of moral courage that separated exceptional warriors from merely competent soldiers. 6 months later, Kyle received a Silver Star for his actions during Operation Steel Curtain, with a citation that praised his initiative and tactical excellence under conditions requiring independent decision-making beyond normal command authority. The award recognized both his tactical success and his moral courage in prioritizing American lives over regulatory compliance. But Kyle's most significant achievement wasn't individual recognition. It was proving that exceptional warriors could transcend institutional limitations when circumstances demanded performance beyond normal parameters. His 8-hour defensive engagement had saved 200 American lives while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded conventional military doctrine. Years later, when Kyle reflected on his military career, the water treatment facility engagement stood out as the day he learned that true leadership sometimes meant making decisions that others couldn't or wouldn't make. His choice to remain in position had violated orders but preserved lives, demonstrating that moral courage was as important as tactical skill. The 200 Marines who safely completed their resupply mission never learned that their lives had been saved by a sniper who chose to disobey orders rather than allow them to be ambushed. For Kyle, that anonymity was appropriate. Warriors existed to protect others, not to be recognized for their protection. Kyle's 8 hours alone against 11 enemies had proven that individual excellence could overcome numerical disadvantage when supported by tactical innovation, psychological warfare, and the moral certainty that came from protecting innocent lives. Sometimes one man really could hold the line when holding the line was what American lives required. The lesson extended beyond military applications, demonstrating that exceptional individuals could achieve extraordinary results when they possessed the courage to act according to their principles rather than institutional expectations. Kyle's defense of the water treatment facility had shown that true leadership meant accepting personal risk to achieve outcomes that served larger purposes. In the end, Kyle's decision to stay and fight rather than withdraw and follow orders had proven that warriors weren't defined by their willingness to obey commands, but by their commitment to protecting the people depending on their skills and judgment. That commitment had cost him nothing more than radio silence with his chain of command, while saving 200 American families from receiving the worst news any military family could imagine. When the commander said retreat, Kyle said no. When the odds said impossible, Kyle said necessary. When doctrine said follow orders, Kyle chose to save lives. That was the difference between a good soldier and a great warrior: the willingness to make hard decisions when easy decisions meant good people died.
See you in the next videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe.